Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey Kerr. After taking about a month-long hiatus, I'm ready to begin the seventh year of the Kerr Reviews podcast. For my first order of business in 2025, it's all about the Oscars. This year's telecast will be hosted by none other than Conan O'Brien. Tariq Khan of Gold Derby has already written his joke suggestions for him poking fun at some of the contenders. I'm about to read some of them out loud one by one. Good evening and welcome to the Academy Awards. I'm Conan O'Brien of Massachusetts, and I am so wicked excited to be your Oscars host. In Wicked, Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande play two young witches engaged in a fierce competition. Which one is more popular? Which one is more powerful? And most importantly, which one has to drop down to supporting to boost both of their Oscar chances? Of course, Wicked isn't the only film with a cast of odd-looking characters dressed in colorful costumes in a land of strange customs and traditions. There's also Conclave. Ray Fiennes is a cardinal trying to select the next pope, but it's no easy task. Not only must they be free from sin, sex, and scandal, they must also profess their admiration for the English patient. Adrian Brody is here tonight as a Best Actor nominee for The Brutalist. He won for The Pianist 22 years ago and passionately kissed Halle Berry as he accepted the Oscar. I can't wait to see how that flies with 5 previous Best Actor recipients presenting the award. All I can say is, it's a good thing Will Smith isn't one of them. Also up for Best Actor, Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan in A Complete Unknown. Timmy gives us a glimpse into the early years of one of the most eccentric personalities in all of show business, and even does his own singing. So it's basically the same thing that he did in Wonka. Turning to Best Actress, Mikey Madison is eyeing the Oscar for her breakout role as a stripper and sex worker in Anora. She's facing criticism for not having an intimacy coordinator on the set, but she's been told that it's highly recommended for tonight's post-Oscar parties. Thanks again for allowing me to be your host tonight, or should I say, the Wizard of the Oscars. And on that note, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Andy Richter insisted on tagging along. In other news, it was recently revealed that the telecast will be skipping performances of the Best Original Song nominees. Instead, they'll be celebrating the nominated songwriters through personal reflections, although they do promise powerful musical moments that connect film's rich history to its bold and inspiring future. It will also be a celebration of connection and collaboration, honoring the unifying spirit and creative energy of movie making. Not to mention that following the devastating California wildfires, the show will pay special attention to Los Angeles, showcasing its beauty and resilience. It should be interesting to see how all of this goes. Regarding musical performances, could we see an appearance from the cast of Wicked? I will say that if Cynthia Erivo performs on the show, they should get John Travolta to introduce her as the wickedly talented, one and only, hoping he gets her name right. Just saying. Now on to the main topic of this discussion. Nominations were announced on January 23rd. Today, we're here to discuss the nominees in each of the top 8 above-the-line categories. What I'm gonna be doing is go through them one by one, reading out loud all the nominees, and give some commentary on them. From screenplay to acting to directing to the biggest one of all, Best Picture. So let's get started, shall we? For Best Adapted Screenplay, the nominees are A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Amelia Perez, Nickel Boys, and Sing Sing. In this category, I went 5 for 5. First time I managed to pull that off in 5 years. Try saying all of that 10 times fast. Each of the films nominated here were pretty much the consensus of what a majority of people were predicting. Conclave and Amelia Perez both got in everywhere but the Writers Guild of America, but neither of them were eligible for WGA nominations, although it looks like they could have gotten in there had that not been the case. Sing for Sing Sing, which only had nominations from BAFTA and Critics' Choice under its belt. Meanwhile, Nickel Boys got in everywhere but the Golden Globes, but they only have one screenplay category that combines adapted and original. Seeing how A Complete Unknown has really been peaking with awards bodies lately, even showing up in this category at WGA and BAFTA, I figured it would show up here too. After all, one of the writers for that is Jay Cox, who's a branch favorite from having been previously nominated for co-writing The Age of Innocence and Gangs of New York. As for possibilities of what people thought would sneak in, Dune Part 2 got in at Critics' Choice and the WGA, as did Wicked. The former could have, given that its predecessor was nominated in 2021, despite the script for that not necessarily being considered the strongest aspect. Although that had a writing credit from Eric Roth, who's a real branch favorite from having earned 5 prior nominations, including a win for Forrest Gump. Roth did not have a writing credit on the second film, which probably cost it a nod here. With Wicked, I knew it wouldn't make it. When it comes to musicals, we've seen in the past that unless they happen to be a serious threat to win Best Picture, as was the case with Chicago and La La Land, they are just never taken seriously by the writers' branch, as was the case with Moulin Rouge, Les Miserables, and Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. The latter was penned by one of the very best scriptwriters working today, Tony Kushner, who got a lot of acclaim for his reworking of the Broadway classic. No disrespect to Wicked scribes Winnie Holzman nor Dana Fox at all, but both of them are no Tony Kushner. Given this branch's long love-hate relationship with musicals, I had a hard time seeing them nominate 2 this year, especially when the other, Amelia Perez, is already a top-tier Best Picture contender. For Best Original Screenplay, the nominees are Anora, The Brutalist, A Real Pain, September 5, and The Substance. For the third year in a row, I went 5 for 5 in this category. Anora and A Real Pain were both nominated by every major precursor, so they were pretty much locks. The Brutalist and The Substance were close to doing so as well, but neither of them were eligible for WGA nominations. Although, had the latter not been the case, it appears that they likely would have gotten in there. As for the 5th slot, it was a bit of a toss-up. Some wondered if Challengers, a hit from back in the spring, would show up here after getting nominated by Critics' Choice and WGA. A majority of people were thinking Hard Truths, given that it was by legendary filmmaker Mike Leigh, who's been nominated in this category 5 times before. Yet the studio behind that, Bleecker Street, has so far not had a great track record when it comes to getting major Oscar nominations. Even though September 5 only showed up at Critics' Choice and nowhere else, that also wasn't eligible for a WGA nomination, but when it made the PGA lineup, I started to get the feeling that it probably would have been nominated by the former had it not been for its ineligibility factor. So I settled on that for the 5th slot, and I'm glad I did. For Best Supporting Actress, the nominees are Monica Barbero, A Complete Unknown, Ariana Grande, Wicked, Felicity Jones, The Brutalist, Isabella Rossellini, Conclave, and Zoe Saldana, Amelia Perez. For the 3rd year in a row, I went 4 for 5 in this category. Ariana Grande and Zoe Saldana were both nominated by every major precursor. Isabella Rossellini came close to doing so as well, but her only miss was at SAG. Meanwhile, Felicity Jones only showed up at Golden Globes and BAFTA. She was looking vulnerable for the Oscar nod, but I still predicted her to show up because I expected The Brutalist to have a strong nomination haul, which it ended up receiving. As for the 5th slot, it was a toss-up. Many were concerned about Jamie Lee Curtis taking it for The Last Showgirl. She got in at SAG and BAFTA for that, has done quite a bit of promotion during final nomination voting, where she's even talked about how she just lost her home in the California wildfires and was coming off of winning for Everything Everywhere All at Once 2 years ago. Some wondered if Danielle Deadweiler would make the cut for the piano lesson, although similar to her run with Till 2 years ago, she only got in at Critics' Choice and SAG, and her film never really caught traction in other categories beyond just her. Some wondered if Selena Gomez would get in as a coattail nom for Amelia Perez, yet only showing up at Golden Globes and BAFTA probably wasn't enough. In the end, I settled on Margaret Qualley for The Substance. While she was only nominated by Critics' Choice and Golden Globes, there's usually at least one acting contender every year who got in with those groups, missed SAG and BAFTA, but still made the Oscar lineup. Plus, with Demi Moore surging in Best Actress, I had a feeling that Academy members were going to view her and Qualley as a packaged deal. How can you nominate one without nominating the other? Yet, the fifth slot instead went to Monica Barbero. I was surprised she pulled it off in the end because usually when a performance only gets in at SAG as their one major precursor nom, they tend not to show up in the Oscar lineup. The last person who managed to overcome that hurdle was Damien Bashir for A Better Life way back in 2011. With that being said, Barbero's inclusion was clearly a sign of strength for a complete unknown. For Best Supporting Actor, the nominees are Yura Borisov, Anora, Kieran Culkin, A Real Pain, Edward Norton, A Complete Unknown, Guy Pearce, The Brutalist, and Jeremy Strong, The Apprentice. In this category, I went 5 for 5 in my predictions. Yura Borisov, Kieran Culkin, and Edward Norton were each nominated by every major precursor. Guy Pearce came close to doing so as well, but his only miss was at SAG. As for the fifth slot, many had different ideas of who would take it throughout the season. When Gladiator 2 started screening, many thought Denzel Washington was not only a lock for a nomination, but also very competitive for the win. He got in at Critics' Choice and Golden Globes, but not BAFTA, which wasn't surprising given how that group never nominated him once throughout his entire career, nor SAG. With that in mind, coupled with the movie itself losing steam since it premiered, he was pretty much done for. Clarence Macklin showed up at Critics' Choice and BAFTA for Sing Sing. He had a compelling narrative of making his motion picture debut playing a fictionalized version of himself during his incarceration at Sing Sing Correctional Facility in the movie, yet I settled on Jeremy Strong. He showed up everywhere but Critics' Choice for The Apprentice and was coming off of his 4-season run as Kendall Roy on Succession, as well as winning a Tony this past year for An Enemy of the People. So I'm glad I didn't doubt him. I should add, on a side note, that the one nomination this year that made me the happiest is Guy Pearce. Around a year and a half ago, I found myself checking out some of his work, following first-time watches with The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Animal Kingdom, and Mildred Pierce, and rewatches with Memento and the 2002 adaptation of The Time Machine. I joined the chorus of those in thinking he's one of the most underrated actors working today. He also became my first choice of actors who've never been Oscar nominated before that I'd love to see become one someday. When The Brutalist premiered at the Venice Film Festival last September, I was delighted to hear all this buzz for his performance, so I'm glad I didn't have to wait too long for my wish to be granted. For Best Actress, the nominees are Cynthia Erivo, Wicked, Carla Sofia Gascon, Amelia Perez, Mikey Madison, Anora, Demi Moore, The Substance, and Fernanda Torres, I'm Still Here. For the second year in a row, I went 5 for 5 in this category. Cynthia Erivo, Carla Sofia Gascon, Mikey Madison, and Demi Moore were each nominated by every major precursor, although many, myself included, wondered if Erivo would be the shocking miss despite getting in everywhere. There's usually at least one of them every season. We just saw it happen to Margot Robbie in Barbie last year. Like Wicked, it was a very populist blockbuster hit. She was playing a character that doesn't typically get Oscar nominations, nor was it a performance older voters would usually find to be Oscar caliber. When Brian Rowe of the awards contender tweeted back in August asking people if they think Arrival will get nominated, I responded with no. This may be great casting, but it's not an Oscar role. Plus, actors never get nominated for playing witches unless you're, as Jared Leto said, in accordance with California state law, Meryl Streep in Into the Woods. That tweet received 6 likes from people. Of course, back then, it was during the era where it felt like the actors branch was willing to nominate Streep for anything. I was tempted to predict a snub for Erivo, but I didn't for 3 reasons. One, I predicted she would miss for Harriet 5 years ago after getting an everywhere but BAFTA, yet she still made the cut, so I didn't want to make that same mistake again, so I'm glad I had the chance to redeem myself. Two, unlike Robbie, she actually had a show-stopping moment in her movie with Defying Gravity. Plus, I heard someone make a point of how on the campaign trail last year, the former was more focused on her contributions for producing Barbie as opposed to starring in it, a problem Arrivo didn't have. 3. Of the other options for who could have replaced her, they all had too many weaknesses going against them. Many thought Saoirse Ronan was a lock to be nominated all season long for the outrun, but her only showing up at BAFTA, coupled with the film itself never really gaining traction anywhere at all beyond just her, didn't help. The former was also true for Angelina Jolie in Maria. She got in at Critics' Choice and Golden Globes, but missed SAG and BAFTA. The same thing happened to Kristen Stewart in another Pablo Larraín biopic, Spencer, but she still made the Oscar lineup. Yet Jolie sadly wasn't as lucky. Pamela Anderson surprisingly showing up at Golden Globes and SAG for The Last Showgirl made many wonder if she was a possibility, but I successfully doubted the Academy would take her seriously. Meanwhile, Marianne Jean-Baptiste did pretty well with critics groups for Hard Truths. She got in at Critics' Choice and BAFTA, but I had a feeling she was going to be more of a critics thing, so I played it safe by going with the consensus 5, and I'm glad I did. As for the 5th slot, despite only showing up at Golden Globes, Fernanda Torres's win there for I'm Still Here pretty much helped her out considerably. She is now the 2nd Brazilian actress ever Oscar nominated in this category, following her mother, Fernanda Montenegro, for Central Station back in 1998. The latter lost that year to Gwyneth Paltrow for Shakespeare in Love. In fact, during a 2020 interview with Peter Travers, Glenn Close mentioned that Paltrow beating her didn't make sense. In response to that, Montenegro said she was grateful for Close's praise, but thought the Oscar should have gone to Kate Blanchett in Elizabeth. For Best Actor, the nominees are Adrien Brody, The Brutalist, Timothy Chalamet, A Complete Unknown, Coleman Domingo, Sing Sing, Ralph Fiennes, Conclave, and Sebastian Stan, The Apprentice. For the 3rd year in a row, I went 5 for 5 in this category. Adrien Brody, Timothy Chalamet, Coleman Domingo, and Ralph Fiennes were each nominated by every major precursor. As for the 5th slot, there were a couple different possibilities. Many early on thought Daniel Craig would become a first-time nominee this year for his performance in Queer. He got in everywhere but BAFTA. Due to him being a Brit, many felt he shouldn't have missed there. Hugh Grant in Heretic surprised people by showing up at Golden Globes, Critics' Choice, and BAFTA. It's got predictors thinking whether or not the veteran actor would finally receive his very first Oscar nom this year. Yet, like with Toni Collette in Hereditary and Lupita Nyong'o in Us, it was a horror movie that's never gained traction in other major categories at all throughout the season. Meanwhile, Sebastian Stan's Golden Globe win for A Different Man, where he even gave a shout out to The Apprentice, which also had him nominated there as well as at BAFTA, I felt was going to help him considerably get in for the latter film, even though he is playing Donald Trump, whom every single educated American hates with a burning passion. Many at least still quite liked his portrayal. For Best Director, the nominees are Jacques Audiard, Amelia Perez, Sean Baker, Honora, Brady Corbet, The Brutalist, Coralie Farge, The Substance, and James Mangold, A Complete Unknown. For the sixth year in a row, I went 4 for 5 in this category. Jacques Audiard, Sean Baker, and Brady Corbet were each nominated by every major precursor. Coralie Farge got in everywhere but DGA, but I, like many, felt the international voting bloc of the director's branch would vouch for her. Plus, I'm sure there was plenty of advocacy to avoid an all-male lineup. Although Edward Berger was nominated everywhere for Conclave, I, like many, felt he was safe. Not to mention that despite missing for All Quiet on the Western Front 2 years ago, we all assumed goodwill for that would carry over to a nom here. Yet, he missed again. Same with Denis Villeneuve. After getting snubbed for the first Dune 3 years ago, despite getting in everywhere, he only got in at BAFTA and Critics' Choice for Part 2 and once again didn't crack the Oscar lineup. They're probably waiting until Dune Messiah to acknowledge his work as director on the franchise, like how it took until Return of the King for the Academy to award Lord of the Rings Best Picture. And to my surprise, the fifth slot went to James Mangold. I didn't think he'd make it because he only got in at DGA and nowhere else. That group typically goes for populist films, so I, like many, assumed that was just a fluke. The last person to have gotten Oscar nominated for Best Director, despite only having DGA as their one major precursor bid, was Morton Tildum for The Imitation Game back in 2014. Plus, Mangold's work on A Complete Unknown isn't what the director's branch typically goes for, yet with the film itself peaking at just the right time in the season, coupled with Mangold being an industry vet at this point, must have really helped. What's remarkable about this lineup is that this is the first time all 5 contenders are first-time Oscar nominees in the category of Best Director since 1997. That year, the lineup consisted of Peter Cattaneo for The Full Monty, Atom Egoyan for The Sweet Hereafter, Curtis Hanson for LA Confidential, Gus Van Sant for Good Will Hunting, and the eventual winner, James Cameron for Titanic. Meanwhile, many have expressed disappointment for John M. Chu not making the cut for Wicked. Not just fans of the film, but also members of the cast. Personally, I knew all season long that he was never getting in. When it comes to blockbuster hits, we've seen in the past that unless they happen to be a serious threat to win Best Picture, they are just never taken seriously by the director's branch. It's how James Cameron wins for Titanic, gets nominated for Avatar, but doesn't get nominated for Avatar: The Way of Water. It's how Greta Gerwig doesn't get nominated for Barbie. It's how Peter Jackson gets nominated for Fellowship of the Ring, snubbed for The Two Towers, but wins for Return of the King. It's how Christopher Nolan doesn't get nominated for Inception, but wins for Oppenheimer. It's how Steven Spielberg doesn't get nominated for Jaws. And as the latter mentioned in his reaction video that year, this is called commercial backlash. When a film makes a lot of money, people resent it. Everybody loves a winner, but nobody loves a winner. Although the good news is that Chu will be back in contention next year for Wicked for Good. So maybe he'll fare even better by getting nominated places beyond just Critics' Choice when everyone experiences his completion of the story. For Best Picture, The nominees are Honora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Amelia Perez, I'm Still Here, Nickel Boys, The Substance, and Wicked. In this category, I went 8 for 10 in my predictions. The films that got nominations from every major precursor were Honora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, and Amelia Perez. Those that got in everywhere but BAFTA were Dune Part 2, The Substance, and Wicked. As for the final two slots, I, like many, expected one of them to go to A Real Pain, which only got in at Golden Globes and PGA, although I had no idea what's the hell to do with the 10th slot. September 5 also got in at Golden Globes and PGA, but it barely gained any traction in other categories elsewhere. Despite only getting in at Critics' Choice, I played it safe by going with what a majority of people were predicting, Sing Sing. When it showed up in Best Actor and Adapted Screenplay as expected, in addition to Best Original Song for Like a Bird, it looked like it was gonna happen in this category. Many were hoping Nickel Boys would make it despite the disappointing precursor run for that film. It only got one Golden Globe nomination for Best Motion Picture Drama, did better at Critics' Choice, but only got in for Adapted Screenplay at BAFTA. I did wonder if the film would pull out a Best Picture nom in the end with only a screenplay bid under its belt, like what we got the previous 2 years with Women Talking and Past Lives. I wasn't brave enough to predict it, but now I wish I did. Meanwhile, I, like many, was completely taken by surprise when I'm Still Here made it into the lineup. That movie literally had no major precursor nod for Best Picture, although I've heard people speculate how Torres winning the Globe, coupled with the voter extension window due to the California wildfires, must have helped a lot. Which is totally plausible, as the latter gave Academy members more time to catch up with the film itself. Because of that, Amelia Perez and I'm Still Here mark the first time ever that two of the nominees for Best International Feature are also nominated for Best Picture in the same year. It could have happened last year with Anatomy of a Fall and The Zone of Interest, but France didn't select the former as its entry for an international feature nom. Meanwhile, Amelia Perez and Wicked mark the first time two musicals were nominated for Best Picture in the same year since 1968 with Funny Girl and the eventual winner, Oliver. It came close to happening in 2021 with Tick Tick Boom and West Side Story, but the former missed out on a nod. So that just about does it for my reactions to this year's Oscar nominations. I'll do my best to provide more coverage of the race within the next month, leading up to the Academy Awards on Sunday, March 2nd.